This is Martin L. Shoemaker presenting the Instant Story Hour, where story comes first. And my lovely and talented assistant for tonight is Michigan mystery author Mark Love, reading from some of his novels. And take it away, Mark.
Well, thank you, Martin. Good evening. It's a pleasure to be here this evening. I'm going to be reading some scenes from my latest book. It's called Rules of Desperation. So, how far would you go to achieve the goal of your dreams? All Nicholas Burr wants to do is traditionally publish a mystery novel. Sure, he's had some success as a ghostwriter for young adult series, but that's not the same. It's not even close. Camille, his long-suffering wife, has had enough. She's tired of being the breadwinner, tired of listening to him prattle on about his next project, tired of him. Nicholas is desperate. Would he do something rash, something unexpected, something so outrageous it would get everyone's attention? Yet if there's one thing he knows, it's that he must follow the rules. Nicky limped down the block, trying not to think about his wife. It was no use. She had every reason to be disappointed. He entered O'Brien's place and took a stool at the far end of the counter. Reed O'Brien automatically slid a mug of beer before him. The saloon was half full. The crowd of blue-collar workers was winding down, leaving behind a trail of mugs, bottles, and shot glasses. Reed came out from behind the bar and flopped into a booth, stretching his legs onto the opposite bench. Nicky followed, bringing his beer. On the wall in the corner, a basketball game was playing on the big screen. Somebody steal your dog? Reed asked. Worse, I got some bad news. Camille isn't taking it too well. Reed lit a cigarette and blew a cloud of smoke in the general direction of the ceiling fan. He watched it rotate for a minute before commenting. Who died? Nicky gave him a half-hearted shrug. I did. Actually, my book did. One of the Skipper books? Reed raised an eyebrow. My kids will be pissed. This was something else. It's a story called Double Cross. It was an adult book. You wrote a dirty book with lots of sex and wild parties? Nicky couldn't help but laugh at him. Not erotica, you idiot. This was for a more mature audience than Skipper. It was a murder mystery. The old lady was counting on this to be the one, huh? She's been patient for a long time. Nobody ever said this would be easy. Reed blew a smoke ring and shook his head. You guys been together forever? Almost 10 years. Reed stubbed out his cigarette and stared evenly across the table while Nicky drank his beer. She been carrying you? Had to drop out of school before I got my degree. No money and no chance for a student loan. I was going to enlist, but didn't pass the physical. Nicky pointed at his bad leg and shrugged. Only work I can find is minimum wage shit. Reed shook his head sympathetically. Life's a bitch. So now you're a security guard. What does she do? Account manager at McKay Products. Sales work. Nicky took another sip. It's a plastic manufacturing company. She started out as a secretary and worked her way up the ladder. Decent job? Camille seems to like it. There's a little travel, and she spends a lot of time visiting clients at their facilities. The hours are long, but they pay well. And you haven't been holding up your end of the bargain. Reed waved the waitress over for a cup of coffee. The job pays some. The Skipper series is nice, but the money isn't much. It's always been my dream to have my own books in print. That may never happen if I can't break through the publisher's slush piles. I'm getting desperate. So what about the self-publishing angle? My wife reads most of her books on her phone or tablet, digital stuff. Couldn't you do that? Nikki nodded. Yeah, but one of the attractions of having a traditional publisher is that they help with all the other facets. They've got editors to polish the script, marketing people for promotions, artists design the covers. If I go the indie route, I'm expected to hire people to do all of that or cover it on my own. I don't have the talent or the money to bankroll that approach. They were quiet for a moment. Nicky was deep in thought. Reed turned his attention to the game. A group in the corner by the pool table groaned in unison and began throwing popcorn at the big screen. Jesus, you gotta play by the rules, Reed said in disgust. Nicky's head came up slowly. What? Play by the rules. Everything's got rules. The hell are you talking about? Reed pointed over his friend's shoulder towards the screen. Basketball game. These guys aren't supposed to walk without dribbling when they have the ball. Nowadays, they take 2 or 3 or 17 steps before taking a shot. That's a foul. Traveling. But nobody calls it. Why can't these guys follow the rules? Nicky just stared at him. Reed didn't notice. Everything has rules. Football has rules. Baseball has rules. Hockey has rules. Everybody knows them, and they're supposed to follow the rules. Even fucking basketball has rules. Say that again? Reed leaned back against the bench. He'd become animated during his rant, thumping a forefinger against the table to emphasize his point. What? About the rules. Say it again. Football has rules. Baseball has rules. Hockey has rules. Everybody knows them and they play by the rules. Even fucking basketball has rules. Everything has rules. His friend grinned broadly and reached for a stack of bar napkins beside the condiments. That's what I thought you said. Reed watched as Nicky began scribbling notes. What the hell are you doing? Nicky had already filled 3 napkins. I'm writing the rules. Once I get them down, then I'll follow them. Rules to what? The rules of desperation. You're going to stop writing books and make up games. Nicky shook his head. No, I'm still going to write, but this one is going to follow the rules. A book about rules? Reed lit another cigarette. Nicky waved away the fumes. I thought it was against the law to smoke in a public place in Michigan. It is, but there are some exceptions, like a private club. That's what this establishment is, allowing my patrons to enjoy their tobacco and a good, cold beer. You need a better ventilation system. Reed ignored him. So this is a book about rules? No, I'm going to write a book people will fight over. And Camille's going to help me. She just doesn't know it yet. Reed noticed a sudden intensity in his friend's eyes. He was about to make a wisecrack, but something in Nicky's manner suggested this wasn't a good idea. Instead, he raised his coffee mug in a salute. Good luck. Scene 2. Several months have passed. While Nicky has been focused on finishing his novel, Camille has been having an affair with a co-worker. When Nicky confronted her at work, she rejected him. Although he refuses to accept it, she knows the marriage is over. The next day, she decides it's time to act. At 2 o'clock that afternoon, Camille knew Nicky would be at work, as would all the other occupants of the complex. It was a miserable day. Cold, nasty rain pummeled the area since midnight. Cautiously, She checked the street, looking for his old Ford. She entered the apartment only when she was positive it wasn't around. She'd come home with only one thing in mind: pack her clothes and get out. If Camille could avoid another unnecessary confrontation with her husband, so much the better. She had one suitcase filled and was loading a smaller bag when she felt someone watching her. Camille. She spun around. Nicky stood in the doorway, glaring. Just let me get my things, then I'll be gone. His voice was ice cold. I told you there will be no divorce. He's waiting for me, Nicky. He knows where I am. Don't make things more difficult. She tugged nervously at the case's zipper. It was hopelessly snagged on a blouse. Nicky didn't move. She noticed he was clutching the cane. The mere sight of it caused her to hesitate. It was a solid hickory walking stick she gave him when he'd been injured. At first, he'd used it. He felt debonair, like a Southern gentleman. But that was years ago. Eventually, Nicky put it away. He decided it made him look like an invalid. His leg must be extremely painful if he's using it again. You're not leaving me. Please, I can't live like this anymore. His face was a dark, stubborn mask. No, I'll still be around. We can talk more when things aren't so tense. Maybe when the book comes back from New York. He stumbled towards her. This one's not coming back. Camille tried to raise the small case as a barrier. He swung the cane deftly and lashed it across her wrist. Camille screamed, dropping the bag. Nicky, don't hurt me. He slammed the cane down on the bed, making her jump away from him. Slowly, he stepped closer. No divorce, Camille. He banged the wall beside her. Each swing of the stick came within centimeters of her head. Don't do this! There was no escape. He had her pinned. The hangers jangled as she backed into the closet. There must be something we can do. There's only one way. Anger flashed across his eyes. He raised his cane above his head, clutching the polished shaft with both hands. No, Nicky, don't! She raised her arms, shielding her face. He brought the stick down quickly, stopping it an inch above her scalp. She could feel it brush against her hair. Quaking with fear, Camille couldn't bring herself to look. She could feel the harsh rasp of his breath on her cheek. You've left me no choice, he snarled, pressing her against the closet wall. Now there's only one way. There was no one to hear her screams. Scene 3. Properly disposing of a body can be a difficult task. If you leave it behind, you never know who might find it or when. He preferred to bring the body along for the ride. He waited patiently for darkness to arrive. With it came an increase in the cold, drizzling rain that had been falling all day. He surveyed the road from his vantage point at the edge of the curve. One faint pair of headlights bobbed and dipped distantly through the rain. He pressed himself lower in the seat. The car was damp and dark, yet he showed no signs of discomfort. He waited until a battered red Toyota bounced through the puddles and passed without giving him a glance. Time to move. He stepped to the trunk. Unlocking the lid, he hesitated briefly, staring at the plastic wrapped bundle. It was a crude job. Most of her legs protruded from the end of the garment bag, where he had slashed away the bottom in a feeble attempt to squeeze her in. There were also holes cut in the side, so her arms stuck out. For a moment, he cursed his own stupidity. Now was not the time for self-recrimination. He bent at the waist and lifted her out of the trunk, struggling briefly for a better grip. At length, he was able to balance her over his right shoulder and begin the awkward trek to the lake. The drizzle and muddy ground made walking difficult. More than once he stumbled. Finally, he could hear the gurgling rush of water flowing downstream. He propped the bundle against the tree. Out on the water, he could see bits of debris slowly headed away from the shore, following the sweep of the lake. Rested, he turned back toward the tree. Gravity had pulled her down. He worked the zipper and removed a bundle the size of a basketball wrapped in thick plastic. Using the knife, he slashed several vents across the bottom. Strands of mousy brown hair were exposed. He bounced it in his hands a few times, enjoying the weighty feel of it. Then he jerked his arm back and flung the bag toward the center of the small lake. It bounced on a tree limb that was floating downstream, and it rolled into the water. He waited, making certain it sank, a satisfied smile on his face. The garment bag had been an afterthought. It was just another indication that he wasn't being careful. The bare legs no longer held any appeal for him as he stood above her. He scoured the area for several baseball-sized rocks. He worked them inside the bag, taking unusual care not to bruise her cold, lifeless flesh. When he could find no more, he closed the zipper. He checked the sections where he'd used heavy tape to hold the remnants of the bag together. Weary with the events of the day, he reached down and clasped her by the ankles. Moving slowly, he dragged her through the wet grass and dirt to the bank and rolled her over the edge. There was barely a sound as she hit the water. There was no terrific splash as if she'd been thrown from a great height, like a bridge or an overpass. There was no triumphant exclamation point to his efforts. The current merely pushed her downstream, carrying her out into deeper water. Without a backward glance, he slowly trudged to the car. There you go.
That's pretty grim, even for you.
Thank you for that. I have my moments.
Yeah. Um, that was I'm about 7 chapters in. Why 319 is it?
Right.
And so I'm familiar with your style. And obviously we're in a writing group together, so I'm familiar with it from that. But I'm not sure that I've read anything where you got this much into the nitty-gritty of the crime and the murder itself before.
I've done that a couple of times in the past, but in this particular one, it just seemed to fit so well with the story.
Yeah. Now, for our viewers who are unfamiliar with Mark's work, he does a lot of stuff in this mystery, not true crime, but in the feel of true crime, of very, very nuts and bolts, down and dirty crime investigations, generally in the Detroit area of Michigan and surroundings, and sometimes farther out into the suburbs and so on. So this is the sort of work I expect from Mark, that it is very much, here is watching the crime and the motivation inside and everything. But this one wasn't part of one of your series. So let's give you a couple minutes to talk about your 2 series so that people
Okay.
know what else to look for from you.
Right. I do have two different mystery series that I've been writing for a while now. The first is the Jamie Richmond series. Now, some people will say these are part mysteries, part romance, because I was told by my first editor that with a last name of Love, which really is my name, that readers are going to expect a little romance in my stories. And I responded that I'm a guy, I know nothing about romance. And she said, well, the beauty of it is you're writing fiction, so you can make it up. And so there are 5 books in the Jamie Richmond series. The main character was an investigative newspaper journalist, did that for a number of years, got very good at getting to the bottom of the story, understanding motivations, and made a lot of great contacts, and really sharpened her writing skills and decided to pursue her passion of writing mysteries. And every time she's working on a new book, through her research or something happenstance, comes upon an actual crime. And Jamie is a very determined redhead, very intelligent, and she wants to figure out who's behind the crime and help bring them to justice. She also begins a romantic relationship with a fellow who's a state police trooper. And again, there are 5 different books in that series. The other one, which was the one that Martin was referring to, is part of the Jefferson Shane series. Now, this is about a squad of detectives that work for the Michigan State Police that investigate major crimes in the metropolitan Detroit area. So these are told more about the squad of detectives, like a police procedural type of story. Uh, in both books, I write from the first person point of view. In the Jamie series, I'm writing from her perspective. In the Shane series, I'm writing from his perspective. So it's a little different, little change up when I'm switching from characters to character like that. But I have a lot of fun with that. And in my background, at one point in time, I was a freelance reporter for one of the big newspapers in the Detroit area. And I got to cover a lot of different assignments, including a crime beat for a while. So I would go to small suburban cities, meet with the top cops, and find out about the crimes from the previous week. And I started to see patterns from one neighboring small city to the next. And when I talked to them about this, they indicated that they really didn't share information about crimes with their neighboring cities. They wanted to try and just focus on their own. And I said, well, if I can see a pattern, you guys should be able to as well. But that gave me the inspiration to create that squad of detectives that would work for the state police and have jurisdiction over that entire 6 million square miles that makes up the metropolitan Detroit area.
Very cool. So you've got now the Jamie series and now this book are about writers and
Yes.
including what they're writing. That what they're writing kind of has an impact on the story you're writing. Did
Yes,
you
it
ever
does.
reach a point where what they're writing sounds more interesting than what you're writing and you kind of want to go tell that story instead?
I've had that happen a couple of times, and I am what many people call a seat of the pants or a pantser. I don't work with an outline. I don't plot things out. I just come up with an idea for a basic for the story and decide which main character I'm going to put into play. And then a friend says, I'm like a police officer. I run around and take down the incident report and figure out what happens. And there's been a couple of times, particularly with the Jamie series, where I'm writing with one thing in mind, and all of a sudden, perhaps it's inspiration from her. My story takes such a dramatic turn that I'm like, forget what I was originally doing. I'm going to follow this. And it's much more entertaining, much better stories as a result of that.
Yeah. Well, when you described in writing group the premise of the rules of desperation, that he's trying to identify these rules and use them to guide the mystery that he writes. I can almost imagine reading the mystery that he writes there. That
I
I want to see how those rules help him write a better mystery, which of course is what you're doing, but you're doing it at the next level out.
Right. And I've actually had somebody ask me, I'm going to go back now and release the story that Nikki was writing to this. And I thought, I'd have to write it first or get him to write it. Then I could go ahead with it. So we did have some fun with the cover where we took what was going to be like the bar napkins where he's writing down the rules and put a few of those on there like rule number 1 was stick to the plan. rule number 5, everybody lies. And just had a few of those on the cover, and I thought that worked out pretty nicely. So,
Yeah. Have you ever read Misery by King? Not the novel, but read the book?
yes, I did.
How he incorporates chapters of the book he's forced to write as chapters in King's book. I
Yes,
thought
I
that
thought
was
that was
clever.
that was extremely clever when he did that, and I was so impressed with that. Uh,
He and he talks about this if you read On Writing, where he turned this into a book about how writing affects his life. And so he's done this with this multiple layer story of the story Paul is writing, and then the story of Paul, and then Paul's delusions and imaginations. And of course, all of this is fiction out of King's head. So there's one more layer there on top of all of that. And I
yeah.
thought that applies to a lot of writers. Some say, no, no, that's not me. But
Oh, I think it applies to many of us that are in this.
now you said you're a pantser. How challenging is that for you as a mystery writer that you don't know what it is until you're going along? How challenging is it to plant clues and whatnot for a crime you don't yet know yourself?
That it can be very challenging. And there have been times, well, like the novel that you're reading, Y 319, uh, I had to go through 4 or 5 at least versions of who the killer really was. And every time I thought I had it, I thought that worked out really well. And I'd step back and I look at it and I go, no, it's just not quite what I was looking for, not quite the fit. And sometimes I've gotten a little inspiration from uh, recent crimes that may pop up on the news or something in my archives that I'll go back and discover. And I'll remember, okay, now, was this case ever solved, or were they able to come up with anything or any plausible leads? Maybe so. But that's a big part of it. Sometimes I have absolutely no idea who the killer is, who the bad guys are. I've had people approach me at some of the events that I've done, and they said, "Well, you're writing fiction. You just make all this stuff up." And I said, "True, but there's a lot of research that goes into it in order to make it a believable story. But yeah, most of it's just coming out of whatever imagination I've got firing at the time."
All right, we got just a few minutes before we get to the second half. So I want to give you a few minutes to wax eloquent about Elmore Leonard and what he means to your career.
Oh, Elmore Leonard was my literary hero. I actually had gotten hooked on his books at a young age, and I had the great good fortune of walking into a bookstore where he was doing a signing, and it was an autograph session, just a little bookstore in downtown Detroit. And I walked in expecting there would be a great big crowd. And he was only going to be there for a couple of hours. There was nobody. He was just sitting at a little 4x4 table, stack of books there, and he had a cup of coffee. And I walked up to him and I could barely get words out. I was just in the presence of greatness here. And I started talking to him, and he autographed a book for me. And I told him I was very interested in writing, and there was nobody else around. So we started chatting, and 10, 15, 20 minutes goes by, and there's still nobody else. And he's telling me all these secrets. And we got to talking about dialogue. And he gave me a look and he said, if you can get dialogue good, if you can get it right, everything else will flow easy. He said, but I want you to pay attention to how people talk, especially if you're writing contemporary stories, because modern day people don't always speak in eloquent, full sentences. You can have one word or part of a word, or they start out in the middle or something. He says, you have to pay attention to that. If you can get that, listen to how people talk, capture that. So I'm just absorbing all of this, and I'm in awe of this man. And he looked like this nice little, like maybe he should be a drummer with a jazz trio or something like this. Not an imposing guy at all. An older lady stepped up to get a book signed, and I started to step away, and he raised his hand and said, "Wait, you stay here." And he talked to her for about a minute, autographed her book, gave it to her, got her. He said, now, where were we? Draws me back in. So I must have had a half an hour, like a master's session, a private conversation with this man. It was just amazing. I still, to this day, cannot believe I was that fortunate to just catch him at that moment and had such a great conversation.
And I think it shows because one consistent element in your work is dialogue, that you are really putting the character's voice into every piece.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
All right, and that brings us right up to the half-hour point. For those who are new to this podcast, which has only been out for this is the second episode, so everybody's new to this. This is where Mark is going to give me a prompt, and I'm going to dictate a story for the next 25 minutes. And he's had 2 weeks now to come up with a prompt to challenge me.
Well, I hope it's a good one. So, all right. Your setting is the moon, the last colony on the moon. You are one of 4 specialists that has been selected to lead a new space exploration project that could last more than 10 years. In order to staff the mission, adding 10 more people, they have to be selected from a pool of 40. Now, you will conduct something similar to speed dating. You have about 4 or 5 minutes to interview each of these potential candidates to identify those that would be the best to include on this mission.
Is that it?
That's it.
All right. Then I will have to work on this. Here we have Commander Myron Jenkins hung his head tiredly, period. His computer spoke up, period. And my apologies for the audience stepping outside of the story just a little bit. I'm going to have Dragon Naturally Speaking transcribe these, and it does much better when I speak my punctuation, period. In fact, comma, I get so used to this, comma, that I end up speaking my punctuation almost anytime I talk to a computer about anything, period. So if I ever leave you a voicemail message, comma, expect me to punctuate, period. The computer said, comma, are you ready for the next applicant? Comma, Commander Jenkins? Question mark, new line. Myron sighed, comma, but there was no putting it off, period. The schedule wasn't stopping for his exhaustion, period. All right, comma, Cal, comma, send the next person in, period. Who do we have? Question mark. New line. This is Jenna Smythe, comma, a specialist in organic cycle, period. And she has been a colonist for 15 years, period. New line. I know that, period. I've been here longer than that, comma. I know the people, period. New line. Do you really want me pre-filtering your information, comma, or should I just give it all to you? Question mark. New line. You're right, comma, Cal, period. Give it to me, comma, but don't be surprised if I grumble, period. New line. You always do, comma, Commander, period. New line. The door slid open, comma, and the next candidate came through, period. And I've lost her name already, period. So I'm going to call her Carla, period. Carla held out her hand to shake his, comma, and it took, man, I'm losing names tonight. Myron. It took Myron a moment to realize what she was waiting for, period. Then he stood, comma, shook her hand, comma, and they both sat, period. New line. All right, comma, Carla, comma, you understand what's going on, period. And we don't have time to waste, period. This Crew has to be completed and ready to go at 3 days from now, comma, so we can start assigning training billets, period. So, colon, explain to me why you have to be on this mission, period. New line. Carla drew in a long breath, period. Myron, comma, if you haven't figured that out by now, comma, maybe I'm the wrong person, period. You should know my record by now, period. How much have I improved the cycle in organics? Question mark. New line. It hasn't all been you, period. New line. It's been my designs, exclamation point. You've seen the reports, period. Or are you ... not reading very carefully? Question mark. New line. Myron stared at her, comma, eyes wide, period. Who's interviewing whom here? Question mark. New line. Carla chuckled, period. Somebody has to take charge here, period. I thought that was you, period. I thought that was why you got this assignment, period. New line. Now wait a minute, ... new line. No waiting, period. We're on a deadline, comma, remember? Question mark. She tapped her comp on her wrist, period. My entire publication history is there in your inbox, period. And Cal, ... hi Cal, period, new line. Hi Carla, period, new line. Cal can analyze it, period. Probably has already, comma, haven't you, comma, Cal, question mark, new line. I have, comma, Carla, period, but none of this is new, period, new line. Myron shook his head at the screen and at the woman, period. You're not going to give me a break on this, comma, are you, question mark, new line. Nope, period. And that's why you need me for this mission, period, new line. Huh, question mark, new line. The last thing you need is a bunch of yeses when the answer is no, period. You need people with different points of view on problems, period, new line. Well, of course, ... new line. No, of course about it, period. We are going to be farther from mission control than we have ever been before, period. Time lag, light speed lag will be as many as 12 to 14 hours when we get there, period. We won't have time to call back to ask questions about the right things to do, period, new line. Well, of course not, comma, that's why I ... new line. That's why you're in charge, comma, but you're going to need the best information from the best people possible, period. And you're going to need it right away, period. You can't wait, comma, you need to have all of the opinions and all of the points of view and all of the constraints so that you can make an informed decision, period, new line. Yes, comma, that's standard doctrine, period, new line. Standard doctrine, comma, my ass, period. In any large group like this, comma, political games get played, period, dominance games, period. You need someone who will cut through the crap, period, and that's me, period, new line. So you think that makes you a candidate, question mark, new line. I think that makes me your second fucking in command, comma, if you have any sense, period. And if you don't, ... then I don't want to be part of this, comma, because you'll get us killed with that intransigence, period, new line. Cal spoke from the screen, period. Time's up, comma, commander, period, new line. Myron looked at Carla, comma, shaking his head, period. She asked, comma, is that a no, question mark, new line. That's a did I have any choice at all, question mark, All right, comma, you're on the list unless mission control overrides you, period. New line. Am I second in command? Question mark. New line. Real authority isn't appointed, comma, it's assumed and earned, period. You keep yourself like you've been going and make sure that I know what I need to know even when I don't want to, comma, and you'll be second in command, period, and everyone will know it, period. New line. She rose from her chair, period. In that case, comma, commander, comma, welcome aboard, period. New line. That's my line, period. New line. I know, period, but I want to keep ahead of things, period. The door slid open, comma, and she strode out, period. As the door slid behind her, comma, Myron slumped into his chair, period. New line. Then he looked at his screen, period. You enjoyed that, comma, didn't you, period. New line. Cal had no face on the screen, comma, so he couldn't nod, comma, but the way he responded sounded smug, period. I had an idea, period. New line. Myron shrugged, period. It was probably what I would have chosen anyway, period. That attitude is exactly what I need, period. My job on this mission is to be right, period. Everyone else's job on this mission is to tell me when I'm wrong, comma, so I can be right, period. So I need more like her, period. New line. Cal sighed, dash, dash, a completely unnecessary thing in an AI, comma, but Cal liked to sound human, dash, dash, and said, comma, there aren't more like Carla, period. You know that, period. New line. All right, comma, who do we have next? Question mark. New line. There was a pause, comma, a long pause for Cal, comma, and Myron said, comma, what's taking you so long? Question mark. New line. Len Isaacs isn't here, period. New line. What? Question mark. New line. Len Isaacs was next up, period. He's not in the anteroom or in the outer office, period. I don't know where he is, period. New line. We'll track him down, exclamation point. But if he can't be here on time for this, comma, I'm not sure we want him anyway, period. New line. He is an excellent power plant engineer, period. New line. Yes, comma, but not the only one we have, period. If necessary, comma, I'll find someone who's prompt. New line. I suppose there's a point to that, period. But just so you know, comma, he is the best of all who signed up for power plant engineering, period. New line. Fine, dot, 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 fine, dot, dot, dot. All right, comma, so who's next after him? Question mark. New line. Yelena Smiranich. I can't spell that name, but Smiranich, period. She's in logistics, period. New line. That made Myron happy, period. They really needed logistics on this, comma, more than anything, period. They were going to be farther from resupply than any mission had ever been, period. And once they reached the moons of Jupiter, comma, they were going to have to forage to support themselves, period. There were only so many supply barges they could count on from Earth before there would be a change in administrations or a change in policy, and they would find themselves cut off, period. So they needed someone who was going to give them proper logistics support, period. All right, we're at a good enough point here for a curveball. You have a curveball for me yet?
I do. I've got one in mind. So the candidates that are selected must also be compatible in order to complete the repopulation of the species because it has dwindled dramatically.
All right. Interesting complication here. I can work that in. Let me keep going. And I don't remember. We had Len had gone disappeared, and I don't remember who we had next coming up from logistics. So I am going to say that this happens often when I'm doing this. If I'm not writing down notes, I lose track of names.
Sure.
So we're going to say that this is going to be it was a Russian name.
Yes.
So I will just call her Mila, and I'll fix it in editing.
Okay.
Mila came through the open door and immediately sat, period. She didn't wait to be invited, period. That was not uncommon for her at all, period. New line. Myron sighed at that, comma, but quietly, comma, hoping she didn't notice, period. She was going to be trouble on the compatibility index, period. He'd already seen that red flagged, period. Where Carla was a dominant personality, comma, she could still be trusted to take her place in the organization, period. Mila, comma, on the other hand, comma, had a personality type that was all about dominance, period. It was about winning, period. It was about her place in the hierarchy, period. New line. Myron shook his head at that, period. You could say the same about Carla, comma, but dot dot dot, new line. But nothing, period. They only had so much time here, period. He'd review personality profiles later, period. Mila, comma, he said, comma, tell me why you are the best logistics officer for this mission, period. New line. I'm not, period. New line. What? Question mark. New line. I'm not, comma, but I do have training in medicine, comma, in teaching, comma, in structural repairs, comma, and in agriculture, period. You're not going to be able to afford to have specialists, period. Everyone's going to have to be enough of a generalist to step in case of injury for someone who heads up a specialty, period. New line. Myron couldn't disagree, period. In fact, comma, a major part of the mission planning was constant training and cross-training, period. So you think you can step in for these areas and substitute for the lead personnel in each department? Question mark. New line. Not substitute, comma, just assist, period. But did you pay attention to that list? Question mark. Near the top was teaching, period. How many of your crew have any pedagogical experience? Question mark. New line. They have trained subordinates, comma, most of, dash, dash, new line. Trained. Exclamation point. Ha! Exclamation point. Training is one-on-one special cases and takes a long time and has low results, period. Teaching is a science, period. It is a way of shaping your material for each individual student to ensure that they are getting the proper transfer, proper path from what they know now to what they're going to have to know, period. That takes expertise, period. And I'm the one for that, period. New line. I can see that, dot, 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 new line. You had better, comma, commander, period, because we're going to need your support for this, period. People aren't going to like going back to school, period. You're going to need an expert to get them through it, period. And I am that expert, period. New line. All right, comma, I concede that point, period. And you do have logistics expertise, comma, that's in your record, period. Is there anything else? Question mark. New line. Da! Exclamation point. I am the only female within 100 AUs who will put up with you, period. New line. Excuse me? Question mark. New line. The rest of them insist on seeing you as a boss, period, a manager, period. People resent their managers, period. New line. I don't think, dash, dash, new line. Did I forget to mention that psychology is one of my areas of expertise? Question mark. People resent a boss, period. You are going to face that, period. They will try to be professional about it, comma, but within a crew this size, comma, there's going to be 4 or 5 at least who will resent you so much that it will impact their performance, period. But I will get through to them, period. I will be watching for them and the signs, comma, and I will be the one who goes to them when they're ready to blow and helps them to work off steam in a healthy scenario, healthy situation, period. I will make sure that the crew stays sane, period. New line. Is that really a problem? Question mark. New line. I suspect it's more of a problem than you realize, period. You've been in administration this long, comma, and you still don't really know your people, period. Now you've been promoted, comma, and now you know them less, period. New line. That makes no sense, period. The new line. The higher up you go, comma, the less you know them, comma, because they change in response, period. New line. I see, period. He made a note on his comp, period. You've made a compelling case, comma, but I haven't made any final decisions yet, period. New line. She shook her head, period. You've already decided on Carla, period. I could see that in her face, period. New line. I haven't decided on anybody, period. But Carla's got a strong lead in selection, period. And I, question mark, do I have a strong lead? Question mark, new line. You're the self-proclaimed psychiatrist, period. Figure it out for yourself, period. New line. Da, period. I will see you in training, period. New line. Mila rose and left the office, period. Myron turned back to Cal, period. Any sign of Len yet? Question mark. New line. No, period. I put out sniffers in the network to see where he is, period. New line. And you haven't found him yet? Question mark. I thought you could investigate anywhere, question mark. Exclamation point, period, period. That should be a period. New line. Anywhere where I haven't been turned off for privacy reasons or mission security, period. You may have to send someone looking for him, period. New line. And that's close enough to 8:55 that I think I will call that a break point where I can continue on from there with just a small tease for everybody that as soon as you presented the scenario for me, because it was you presenting it, I knew somebody in the crew selection list is not alive anymore. That this has to be a murder mystery on top of everything else. So
Well,
I don't know who killed him or why. So
that sounds perfect.
excellent prompt and nice curveball.
Thank you.
I'm already a week behind on getting last week finished, so it depends on how things go this weekend. I'm a slush reader for the Writers of the Future contest, as you know.
All
And
right. Yes.
we wanted to get the slush pile finished so that we could pass it off to the coordinating judge, Jody Lynn Nye. And I think I can safely say to our private little audience of all the people that happen to watch this on YouTube, we finished that this week. So
Very
the
good.
results are the stories are now in Jody's hands for her to make final decisions. But we had a lot of work to do because we get thousands every quarter, and there are only a handful of us doing the slush reading. So kind of in the last week, I haven't been doing much to finish last week's story, but now I've got time for last week's and this week's.
Well, I'll be looking forward to reading both of those when you have them available.
Now yours is starting to grow. Last week's, by the end of the week, end of the episode, I was like, okay, I can see a path this is heading on. It's kind of heading towards a conclusion, maybe. Yours is, I mean, it's a murder mystery and we haven't found the body yet. So yours is going to take me a little longer. I have this theory of story structure, especially when you're pantsing, where it starts at a tiny little point and it diverges out as you explore until you reach a point where, aha, I've got all the pieces that I need, and it starts converging towards the climax.
Right, exactly.
This story isn't close to converging yet. So
Well,
it
it's a
may
good
up me
beginning.
longer than I thought.
Yeah.
So, all right. I am very happy to have had you join us here this week, and I will be including your URL for your webpage in the credit slides when I add those after we're all done. But what's
Right.
your website?
It's motownmysteries.com.
All right. And where can they find your books? I mean, obviously online. Are there any good places to look in the Michigan area or
Well, I haven't been able to connect with any of the bookstores in the area yet. I keep trying to find a good one that I could call home. But I am traveling to a number of different venues each week, it seems. I've got this coming Saturday, which would be the 15th. I'll be in Coldwater for the Strawberry Festival, and then I'll be in Otsego the following week for their art festival. And I'm doing, somebody says like I'm doing a world tour for a rock band. I thought that would be nice if I could pull that off. So
and it's
either that or I'm a
necessary with a
carny.
launch. A
Yeah,
launch like this, you need to hit as many as you can. So,
precisely.
while we have a minute left, have you talked to Blue Stocking Bookshop in Holland?
I actually have not been there lately. I was there a couple of years ago around Thanksgiving time. Um, but I'm going to be in Holland in early August for a big art in the park event, and I think that'd be an opportune time to make a little detour after the show and go up to Blue Stocking, talk to them.
They're very supportive of indie authors in the area, so I recommend them, and I'm giving a free plug for them because they are very supportive. So I want to be very supportive of them.
Well, I'll definitely check that out.
All right. Uh, so we are going to be returning next week with Illustrators of the Future winner Jennifer Mellon. So this is
Oh,
going to be a different format because it won't be a author reading their work. It will be an illustrator showcasing her work. So this will be my first illustrator. Hopefully I haven't painted myself into a corner, if you'll pardon the pun. Hopefully this will go as well as it's been going for the writers. So,
sounds very interesting. So
all right. Well,
check
thank
that
you,
out.
Mark.
My pleasure,
And
Martin.
thank
Thank
you,
you so much.
everyone. And look for us on YouTube. I will have this hopefully ready in the morning. Thank you.
All right, very good. Thank you again.